I'm so glad that we finally got a chance to get together and record it. And we've been talking about some of these questions for some time. So I'm excited that we finally get a chance to put them down and share them with the rest of the world. So thank you. Thank you for being here today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe just tell me a little bit about yourself. What's your background? Tell me a little bit about your world.
Sure. So I have around 14 years of experience in oncology. Started off as a radiation therapist, working clinically with patients, which I love. That led me to a leadership role as an operations manager running a new cancer center that was built. So I had the unique opportunity to be a part of that design and build for that cancer center. Did that for 3 or 4 years, and then I moved into a director role. So I have the unique kind of array of experience there where I know the clinical side and I know what it's like to, work on the machine and be kind of boots on the ground, but also the kind of operational and business perspective of oncology.
That's awesome. And I love that you said that, you like the clinical side as well. I think that's so often I hear that from administrators how passionate they are about the patient and clinical sides. Because I think at the end of the day, that's why a lot of us are still in the space, right, and in this field. So,
That's right. That's right.
yeah. I know that this year has been a big change year for reimbursement, and we're seeing and hearing from a lot of people that there's a lot of changes to reimbursement. There's a lot of changes operationally. What are you seeing out in the field?
Right now, I'm seeing a lot of complexity. Cancer care has become incredibly advanced. The operational side hasn't always been able to keep up, unfortunately. There's a lot of staffing constraints. There's shortages of, therapists, dosimetrists, physicists, even physicians. I'm seeing clinics struggling to find, radiation oncologists to staff, and also the right mix of experience that I think a lot of places are looking for. I'm seeing a lot of workflow inefficiencies out there, especially between departments like medical oncology, radiation oncology, imaging, difficulty communicating between all those different departments, and just also the administrative burden now of prior authorization, which is kind of the hot topic right now today in radiation oncology specifically. But documentation, compliance, it's a lot. It's a lot to keep up with. And I think all those complexities create a system where there's a lot of really talented people out there and they're spending a lot of time navigating all these difficult things, and it's a struggle to focus on patient care, which, like you said, that's why we're here, right? That's what we're passionate about.
Do you see leaders of programs right now struggling with anything in particular? Is it just so busy and so much change all at once that it's hard to hone in on one thing? Is it the complexity of having to deal with like the day-to-day operations of the center, plus the clinical side, plus buying equipment, plus dealing with service contracts, plus the vendors, plus the reimbursement changes? It just seems like there's a lot. So I'm just wondering how are you seeing program leaders dealing with that ball juggling at the moment? And maybe as you think through that, what makes the ones that you're seeing do it well versus the ones that maybe aren't doing so well? What do you think is differentiating them?
I think the main difference are the ones that have been proactive and not reactive, right? So we've known a lot of these changes have been coming for quite some time now. We maybe didn't know all the details, but we knew it was coming. And there's a lot of centers that waited. They waited until after the fact to try to figure out what to do. And at that point, you've created a lot of problems, right? So there's a lot of centers I've seen that have used data to anticipate what was gonna happen, how it was gonna affect their clinic, instead of just having a quick response after the fact. And, trying to standardize processes and workflows beforehand so that they could be ready instead of just reinventing the wheel after all these changes have taken place, because it is a lot to juggle all of those things, like you said, especially as an administrator. But I mean, even as the clinical staff, they're the ones on the ground. They're trying to drop all these codes and perform all these tasks. And as things have gotten just increasingly complicated, I think it's just the places that have just been proactive and prepared are the ones that are really thriving right now.
I've heard 20% cuts in reimbursement, which of course changes how people buy equipment, even equipment they bought that now all of a sudden maybe doesn't make sense, or the performance that they calculated don't make sense. We've gotten questions, as you know, from people saying, hey, can you or evaluate this JV? Can you look at our contracts? Can we look at how we're looking to buy equipment? Because some of the calculations that they made originally just aren't making sense anymore in the new environment. And I feel for administrators. I'm empathetic to the amount of work that they're under. And then the addition of the stress of a 20% reimbursement cut plus seems like a lot at the moment,
It
for
is.
sure.
Yeah,
And you're trying to still, like you said, still treat patients at the end of the day, right? The complexity is not it's not lost on me. Have you seen a lot of centers think about AI? I know there's a lot of vendors out there that promise a lot of improvements with AI and what it's going to do. And have you seen or heard from administrators and from centers how they're trying to juggle that and trying to make sense of that?
sure. I think there's a lot of pressure, as you said right now. And I think there's a lot of curiosity with administrators and AI. I think there's a lot of us want to understand what AI can do. We're hearing about it everywhere you look. You can't get on any kind of social media. I mean, even on television, it's everywhere, and specifically in healthcare. And I think we want to understand what it can do for us, around scheduling, workflow optimization, but how do we figure that out? How do we decide what's best for us? Because there's so many options out there and it's overwhelming. And there's products claiming that they can fix our problems, right? You all want our day to be easier and smoother, right? But I mean, what does that mean and what does it cost? And is it even worth it? There's a lot of skepticism too because, in healthcare, we need to be accurate and we need our staff and patients to have trust in our workers and what we're doing. That's critical to good patient care. And as we talked about the financial constraints, it's even tougher right now with all of these billing changes and the staff are making more money, which is wonderful. That's great. That's what we want. That's how we get staff, right? But things are not getting cheaper either. You mentioned the service contracts and all the things that we have to deal with on top of what it costs to even get this AI. How does that impact us? And that's definitely a struggle right now.
Yeah, for sure. I've seen people trying to sort out AI, I think, backwards a little bit, right? Because there's so much technology that's being thrust upon every administrator out there. And so it's like they're being reactive rather than proactive, right? So rather than thinking about what the workflow should be or trying to think about what the process is that you're trying to improve, it's like some vendor shows up with something that says, hey, this is going to save you time or clicks or money. Uh, and I think it's so important to really take a step back and think through what should that workflow be? What is it that you're actually trying to solve for? What are the measurements that you're going to have or that you're going to put in place to see what the tool is going to do to actually improve your department? Because otherwise, you're just buying a piece of software to try and make something better, and it may just cost you money, but it's not going to improve anything. Or worse yet, it may actually take you longer because
Yeah.
you end up getting sucked into trying to build it into something without having the workflow behind it that's running and that's making it work. So I think there's for sure an opportunity for folks to think through that what you're trying to solve before you actually go and do it.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because I actually had a conversation with a physicist the other day who was in that situation where she had sat down with a vendor, watched a presentation, was super excited, kinda got mentally sold on this tool that was cool, and we talked about it, and yes, it was awesome. I'm sure it would be very helpful, and it was a workflow tool, and I asked her, I was like, "Do you have a problem with this right now? Is this an issue that you're facing in your clinic?" And she didn't really have an answer. She wasn't like, "Yes, this is bothering me every day. I can't get this done." It was more like, "This looked really cool and I wanna use it," but she didn't really even know why. And I think that's probably what a lot of people are facing right now.
Yeah, and if I think if you don't know that piece of it, then figuring out if something's worth the investment is even harder because if you can't justify the workflow that you're trying to improve or the solution you're trying to actually come up with, then justifying the financial return on investment is really hard. And so I think those go hand in hand. It's just a matter of sequencing them correctly so that you can actually have a really good understanding of what you're trying to solve and then make sure that it brings value to your clinic in a way that's meaningful. I think you mentioned service contracts just a minute ago and dealing with those and negotiating those. We've been obviously sharing some thoughts on the importance of measuring performance from vendors on service contracts and why that matters. And I think it's similar to the discussion we just had on the software. If you're not measuring how the vendor's doing against the service contract, it's hard to be able to have a really strong negotiating position with that vendor when it comes time for renewal. And so I think, again, thinking through the key metrics that you want to measure and whether they're actually delivering on those or not makes a huge difference in today's environment as you head into negotiation sessions with the vendors.
Yeah, I agree. Not seeing a lot of centers right now that are even tracking those metrics, to be honest. I think a service contract is something that you get and you get a 5 year, 9 year, whatever contract, and you don't ever look at it again except once a year when AP sends you an invoice to approve and you approve it and you don't think about it again. And I think that's a huge gap right now in clinics, and they don't even realize it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, especially given the number of balls that clinics are juggling, it's so it's an autopilot, but autopilot that compounds as service contracts do over time can become really significant in terms of the revenue for a clinic. I mean, you're talking about millions of dollars of potential savings by doing this correctly versus not. And again, no fault to the administrators that are trying to treat patients and run the center and everything else. It's just one more ball that they have to keep in the air. And it's hard. It's hard. And we haven't even touched, of course, on the buying or replacement of equipment, which is another one, right? You have all the vendors that come in, and again, every bell and whistle is on the quote. You've seen them, I've seen them. These quotes that have every single feature, regardless of whether the clinic actually needs it or not, or an understanding of what the clinic is trying to do. And it's hard. It's hard as an administrator to deal with that, right? To know, hey, I'm getting a quote from a vendor, but the vendor doesn't really have the interest of the clinic in mind when they're preparing the quote. They have their quarter, their end of year. They're trying to put the quotes together. And I'm not digging on vendors. I mean, I was on the
Right.
vendor side for 20 years. It's just how it's set up, right? You're trying to sell as much as you can
Yeah,
of
that's
what
your
you have
job.
in your bag. So
Yeah. I mean, I think I've sat there and listened to I've been on the other side of that, obviously, and listened to the vendor presentations, and I think often we hear, like you said, there's line items in there, and we're like, "Yeah, I'm not really sure what that does. I don't know what this is," and some of the things even just get lost. I mean, these are contracts, so many pages of contracts, and they give it to you to read, and a lot of times it doesn't make sense to you, right? And if you don't have someone in your clinic or have someone on your side, like MedSol, for example, that can go through this for you and tell you what's missing or what's there or help explain things, you could end up spending a significant amount of money that is worthless, for something that's just not, you don't need it in your clinic.
yeah, it's funny thinking back to when I was on the other side and customers hated me for it. I refused to give people quotes for the longest time, right? Somebody would ask me for a quote and I was like, I'm not going to give you a quote. I'm going to give you a spreadsheet. And they were like, but I need a quote. I have to budget for it. I was like, I'll give you a number and I'll give you a spreadsheet, but like, we have to understand what it is that we're trying to actually put together before I can actually give you a quote. Giving you a quote just sets up a price and some product, but it doesn't actually talk through the actual thing you're trying to solve. And it was so important for me then, and it's even more important for me now on the other side of the table, helping these clinics just really understand what they're trying to do and what clinically they're trying to solve for. Because if you don't understand that and you can't come up with, what they're trying to do in the next 5 years, putting together a quote is meaningless. The last thing I wanted, when I was on the vendor side was to sell a piece of equipment that wasn't going to do what the client wanted. And even more so now, that's all I care about is the success of the program and making sure that at the end of the day, what we've helped either negotiate or package makes sense. And there's so much less leverage with the big purchases that vendors are driving that I think it makes all the sense in the world to have somebody else that has been on the other side helping with that, understanding how that's assembled and putting those deals together.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to hear you talk a little bit about MedSolve and just what are some of the problems in contract negotiation and review and even the AI and all the automation that is out there? What are some things that we do at MedSolve that can help solve some of those operational problems?
I always start with what the practice or the clinic is trying to solve for. That's why MedSolve exists, is to try and help the clinics. And there's really four areas that we focus on, as you know. One is how to buy and package things better. We've seen what works with vendors. We know that sometimes having the vocabulary of the vendor side helps in how you package a deal together, and understanding how to bundle things together or how to look at something more holistically can make a huge difference in terms of the discounts and the long-term value of that contract. And this is not just about price. It's about understanding that sometimes training or uptime or service can be what you're thinking about as opposed to just price. We do quite a bit of work in the operational workflow side of things to look at why practices are working the way they're working and see if there's any areas that we can help improve and drive operational efficiency in to help again drive those revenues. So that's another big area that we look at. If you think about the cuts in reimbursement and the challenges and margin pressures that everybody's under, we take a slightly different lens, which is okay, got it. So there's going to be less money to play with. How can we help mitigate that? And one is the cost of the equipment and the cost of the service contracts. The other one is operational efficiency and improvements in the department. And then can we look at expanding the program through either new service lines like theranostics or benign disease that can help bring additional revenue into the department as opposed to what you're already focused on. And then on the AI side of things, there is so much being thrown at people. I never thought that I'd end up using my computer science degree for this because it didn't really exist in this way back then when I still had hair. But the reality is, it helps to have somebody that understands the technology, that's playing with it, and that also understands the clinical and operational needs of a department to look at it and say, yeah, I can help with this. And here's how you should think about it. Here's how you can evaluate it for your particular department. And I think every department's going to be unique. I think understanding each department is part of what we take great pride in, having people like you that understand the operations of the department and the clinical needs of a department tied together with the business side of the world to improve the overall efficiency and revenue for department. And the last bit of it, and I have to say this because I think it's part of why we wanted to do MedSolve the way we've done it, is we wanted to work with people we really liked. And part of what we wanted to create with MedSolve was a group of folks that were trusted and that people liked and that were good humans. And I think that's such a big differentiator for us as we look out in the market.
Yeah, I like that. I can't tell you how many times I have sat through these vendor presentations, like you said, or even after the fact, after a piece of equipment or software or something was purchased, and I'm sitting there with the staff and they still feel like they don't know what they're doing with it, right? Like, we have this new thing, this new shiny thing, or this new cool tool, and it's like we're kind of using it, and but we're not really even sure if we're using it to its maximum, capacity, if we're using it the way it's supposed to be used. So I think it's really, I wish I had someone, like you, or, a company like MedSolve when I was on that side to come in and help us even understand some of those things even more, and how we could be more efficient.
I think it makes all the difference in the world for sure.
Yeah. When is the right time for a center to bring in someone like MedSolve to support their strategy or to support their initiatives? Because that's the other thing, right? Like, we don't have time. We're busy. We're running around doing all the things that we've talked about here. So, how do we know as an administrator that we need help, that we need somebody to come in and look at our workflows and look at what we're doing and making sure that we are being efficient?
I think the short answer is the earlier the better, because you can have a much longer runway to help and to look strategically at things like you said. If you're looking at a 3 or 5 or 10-year plan, it makes all the sense in the world to have someone that can help. If you're looking to buy equipment, or you're looking at a service renewal, or you're looking to expand your service lines, or you just got hit with the reimbursement and you're not exactly sure what to do now, those are all great opportunities. If somebody's pushing new software, new software tools or AI, is a great time to have a second set of eyes on it and just help out. If you're running around and you don't have time to look at these things, that's a great time to call someone for help. That's a good indication that you probably need a little bit of help. And I think everybody's in that position to some extent because of the amount of work that practices and directors have at the moment.
Yeah, I agree.
I appreciate your time so much. I know how much you enjoy being out with customers and helping with programs. It means the world to me and to them to have you on the team and being out there to help. So thank you so much for that. And again, thank you so much for the time today.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. Great chat.